Hey guys, the monkey is looking around saying, come on, start a new file. So we're going to do that. So here we are with Suzanne. We're going to hide Suzanne. And then we're going to start setting up a new scenario. What I want to talk to you about today is working with alpha masks. We're going to make our own alphas by, it's technically not an alpha, it's calculated, but we're going to play with a black plane, and we're going to add an emission shader to the shader. That way it comes out just exactly what you see is what you get. We're going to change our color management area to something that's standard, not working with the fancy stuff, because that's what we don't need to do. We're going to make 10 images in an image sequence. We'll load them all up at the same time. So we're setting the timeline for 10 frames, and we're going to hit home. It puts us in that position where we can see each one. So we're going to go to the compositor. I wanted to show you what I did to get the image that I end up showing you, but you don't have to work with the render output. You can use just a viewer. You run your source image to the viewer, change one of the windows to image editor set to the viewer node, and so you can see, you can have the image right there. Once we get done with doing our color adjustments with the RGB levels, we can then save that image from the image editor right there. Just say image save, and then we can bypass the whole need to render it out. It's already basically there. We just got to get it out. Main thing for your images for your brush is when you're doing these adjustments, you want to get as much of a contrast so that you pick up solid darks, solid lights. That way you've got something to actually mask with. Once I've got the image, I'm going to go back to the scenario in the 3D view. What we're going to do is we're going to add the image, the entire image, to an object. So I picked a sphere because that's basically the kind of shape of their cursor. When we're painting it, it's a circle. So I'm going to use a UV sphere and rotate it on X, and I'll scale it down a little bit. Not just because it fit in the camera better, but because I need that area on the sides to be solid black. So we're going to make this thing fade out to black, and then we'll do that in the shader. Basically, another emission shader. I think I need new glasses. My eyes are getting bad enough to where it's getting harder to see the menus. I'm gonna have to really increase the size of my menus. But we bring the image in, we set it as a texture into the sphere, and we need to have some mapping controls. So we set a UV node and a vector mapping node. That we want to set it to texture, and that has a better control. Okay, and then this is when we set it for sphere because it's a little easier to do the rotation. When you have the image going out to the edge, we want to fade it. So we're going to use a layer weight node facing, and we're going to very carefully blend it so that it fades from the front face of the texture out to the black, and then we'll be able to roll it, move it. You see with the mapping node, now we can actually manipulate what will end up being captured in our camera as an image. And we didn't have to cut out anything out of the original image. We didn't have to, erase things or make them transparent. We're actually just using the black and white. I mean, that's the bulk of everything that works in Blender, is working with black and white images. Incidentally, if you're going to do a lot of PBR in Blender, what you're going to do is you're going to add different maps right off the bat to your object from the texture paint mode. You'll end up choosing metalness, or you'll choose roughness. Those are going to be black and white. images and you're going to paint with black and white on them. So here we start setting keyframes. With keyframes, this allows us to record the location, rotation, and scale of the mapping. And what we're doing is when we've got it where we want it, we make the change, we press I to add that to the keying set. So at the very beginning, I hit K to set a keying set. And then for each actual frame, I'm going in and making changes. Incidentally, if you don't want to deal with doing this one at a time on here, I'm just really, I guess I have a control issue. I wanted to see what I was going to get so I could have a choice. But what you could do is set a keyframe on the first one and a keyframe on the last one, and then let it cycle through to get to that point. But I like to have variation, so I wanted to make sure I had a lot of different options. Once we get to this point where we've got all 10, then we're going to render them out. And that will be a sequence, because we're going to set our output in the properties panel to a folder of our choice. We're going to put a name for the images, and that name will end up with a 001, 002, and etc. So that give us a sequence of images. Now the timeline being set to 10, it's actually that's part of the plan, because we make 10 images. We're going to be bringing these 10 images back, and we're going to use them in that timeline. So here I'm going to set it to RGB because I don't want an alpha channel that makes it too large anyway. And I'm going to set a new folder, and I have to name it. So I set something like a sequence or something like that, and I accept it. And once you've got that, you just got to go about rendering it, just making sure everything's fine before I do anything, and then render animation. And here you go, you got 10 frames to be used. And see how they fade off to black? That means we're going to have a lot more easier time using them as textures. Now I save the file, and I'm going to bring in a new image. Forgot that I actually started a new file. That means I got to set my timeline again. But we'll be doing that. We'll set that timeline to 10. Press home. And then we're going to make a new mask brush. Not a brush, but a brush mask. Sorry. We're going to open that sequence. So you just go wherever you saved it. It even says image sequence, so we have to toggle cyclic and automatic. And I think I got to come back and tell it to calculate alpha, because I get a little bit carried away right off the bat. Also, I scaled them down because I wanted to make sure how big they were. And then also, once I see it, I'm like, oops, it's repeating. So I need to go back to the mapping of the brush mask and tell it to clip. Yeah, there we go. And then now that I see how small it is in the deal, I can go back to like 1.2 or something like that. Because your brush, you want the brush to have a clear space around it. You don't want to have any extra pixels starting and then not finishing. You want those pixels to be delivered and done, because otherwise it'll be very obvious it's a brush and not some sort of natural texture. So here I'm setting stops on a gradient because it's, it's fun to play around with a brush that actually changes as you press harder and softer. I think I went through a period where I was trying to figure out how the best way to show you how they work. So we're gonna go to an anchored, and I'm gonna draw it out so you can kind of see what's going on. And then we can show you that there's a different pattern on the second and on the third, etc. Each one's got a different pattern. And see, this is also something you can do later on if you get used to setting these things up. You can go in and make different, you can just get different texture images of like metal, wood, stone, concrete, grass, whatever, and you can make a master brush of just an image sequence where you can toggle with just the timeline. So instead of trying to go back and forth changing brushes, now here's where it gets crazy. I'm sorry, but this is one of my favorite things. Is so pressing the timeline, you can play back through the brushes. Now, as you dab, it's not going to change mid dab. So if you dab a brush, it's going to be that brush, even if it just changed 5 brushes. I mean, 5 images behind it. But now you can see where it's changed, and you get. This is with that anchored again. So anchored stroke is very interesting, especially if you're doing like putting dirt on an object. Like if you're doing a lot of PBR and you want to have some sort of detail, like dirt, grime, that you want to line up on something, and you want to do it really quickly, you can just add another image, alpha image over the top, and then you can throw some brushes together like this and just put it on there. So you can map them differently. You can make them behave differently. Using a large like that, I kind of like that too, because it shows right off the bat that you can do a lot with the paint. I think that once you've got a look that you like, then you can save that set of brushes, keep them handy. You make different sets. I've done it before with making different grunge brushes, or with the fun one is making watercolors, but they're a little bit harder because you really have to work on trying to separate the patterns in watercolors, because the areas around them can bleed together, and so it's a little harder to pull those out. But here we're just doing some different settings. Just remember, art is a 3-letter word, A-R-T. Also, fun is a 3-letter word. So art is fun. Go out there and have some fun. Thanks a lot. Talk to you later.